Everybody. I hope you are all having a good evening. In tonight's video, I'm going to be talking about knitting color work. So there's basically three main ways to do it. With stripes, with Fair Isle, and with Intarsia. And I'm going to be going over those three different techniques. And then I'm going to be showing you how I want to take the design that I made with Kid Craft Time and turn it into a colorwork knitting pattern. So that's what you're in for today. So the first thing that I wanted to go over, and kind of the main topic, is going to be the different kinds of color work that there are to do in knitting, and sort of when I would use one versus a different one. And so I am going to get started with the most basic form of color work. This, I'm specifically going to be using examples with knitted pieces, but a lot of this information kind of translates a little bit to crochet as well, if you are more of the crochet persuasion than the knitting. So the basic concepts of some of this stuff is definitely going to translate between the two. So the most basic kind of color work that you can do in knitting is just really basic stripes. Stripes are an incredibly easy thing to do. When you're doing a knitted or crochet piece, you are going to use one color until that stripe is as big as you want it, and then you're going to let go of that strand of yarn, and you're going to pick up the strand of yarn that is the new color that you want to be working with, and you're going to work with that strand until you're ready to be done with that color. You can make your stripes as wide as you want just by doing more rows back and forth with your color before you switch to the other one. You can make them as wide or as narrow as you want them to do. You can make stripes go in any direction that you want to, depending on which way you're working your piece. So this scarf, my stripes are going back and forth this way because I made my scarf back and forth this way. Well, I've certainly made plenty of scarves that you put the stitches on your needle this way and you're doing the scarf back and forth in this direction. So in that case, you can do your stripes the long way, if that's the way you want them to. You can make all your stripes the same thickness like this. You can make some stripes thick and some stripes thin. You can do anything that you want in terms of playing with color for doing all of that kind of thing. One tip that I would give for stripes is, for me personally, I do not love weaving in ends. That is probably my least favorite part of the fiber world, or the fiber arts world, is weaving in ends. And so there's a couple of tricks to do if you're going to do like a stripey color work piece. You'll notice in this one, I use green and then I use green again. And so I don't have to weave in ends between these two green sections, even though it looks like I've changed stripe colors. And black again for the same thing, and white again. So the longer you can keep one color as one of your stripe colors, the less ends you're going to have to weave in. The other trick is leave your stripes narrow enough so that you can carry the other color with you. I'm gonna find, so on this edge you can see, as I would when you're looking at it from the front, when I'm knitting with the white, you don't see the black at all. Well, when you turn it, you can see I actually carried the black yarn up the side there. And so that is definitely going to mean I didn't have to weave in ends for this black stripe and this black stripe and this black stripe. I just carried the black with me all the way. So I had one end for the black here and one end for the black here, and that was it. So that's another trick that you can do if you don't want to weave in tons of extra ends with the stripes. So stripes are probably the most basic way that you can do color work with knitting, and stripes are basically going to work identically with crocheting as well, in terms of the flexibility and what you can do with them. The second form of color work, probably the second most common, is going to be Fair Isle. So Fair Isle knitting is sometimes called stranded knitting. There's a little bit of a difference there, but they're basically interchangeable. Fair Isle knitting is you're only ever working with two colors in one row, but you actually are using two colors in the same row. Whereas with stripes, you're only using one color in a row, and then you're done with that color and you're using a different color for a different row to create your stripes. So the Fair Isle technique, the color that you're working with at the time, the actual one that you're doing your knit stitch with, is going to be the one in your hand that you're wrapping around your needle, just like you would with any other piece of knitting. And the color that you're not using for that stitch is still right there with you. It's just hanging out on the back side. So what you'll see in this particular pattern is like I would knit two stitches with the yellow yarn, and the blue yarn would be right there with me. For those two stitches, the blue yarn would just be on the back. So that's what this string is about back here. The difference between Fair Isle knitting and stranded knitting. Stranded is the overarching concept of you're taking two strings with you and they're both involved as you go all the way around. So that's what makes it different than a stripe. You've got that strand happening. Fair Isle has some more specific rules for it to be considered a Fair Isle piece. Generally, you've got repeating motifs in a Fair Isle piece, like here you're doing the same thing over and over again. Generally with Fair Isle knitting, the sort of rule is you never go more than 5 stitches with one color before you switch to another color. With stranded color work, all Fair Isle is a form of stranded knitting, but stranded doesn't have those same rules. You can actually do stranded knitting with more than 2 colors in a row. You can do more than 5 stitches between it and things like that. So Fair Isle is the name of an island in Scotland, and it means a very specific type of stranded color work. But anytime you're seeing these strands on the inside of your piece, you're doing stranded color work. So this is the one that I'm probably the most familiar with and that I have done the most and written the most patterns for. This is one of my, this is an older pattern design. I actually knit this for our first kiddo who's like 5.5 now. So this is a little old, but I really, really like it. It's called Fair Isle Skill Drill. It's a pattern up on our Ravelry store. We're Nomad Original Designs on Ravelry, and I have, I think, 120 patterns up there. So I really like the color work, the stranded color work style. And you can do this for hats and scarves and sweaters and absolutely all kinds of things to do your stranded color work with that. Also, traditionally in stranded color work and in Fair Isle, you only ever do that in the round. So you're going in a circle, and then you'll notice that this was not knit in a circle this is no longer in a circle, and that's because I actually cut it at the end. So it's called doing a steek. And so what you do is you can see the little cut edges here. You fold that over and stitch it down to secure all of those edges. So that means you can work your piece in the round. That's how stranded color work works. It must be done in the round. You can do it in the round, but then to create a flat piece, you cut it open. Steeking is very, very fun. Someday, I'll do another piece that is steeked, and I will do a little video on that too, because it's one of those techniques that looks terrifying and is actually really fun. So that is, we've done stripe color work, we've done Fair Isle color work. The last sort of the most common 3 in knitting is going to be something called Intarsia. And Intarsia and Fair Isle, I think, get confused a lot, get sort of mixed up a lot. And the biggest difference is Fair Isle, you're only ever doing 2 colors in one row, and you don't ever go very many stitches of one color before you switch to the other color. So you're creating something like this. You're creating something where you're using 2 colors pretty often. You're only doing a few stitches of one and then switching to the other. And both of those colors are coming with you the whole way across. And Fair Isle you always do in the round. Intarsia is sort of the opposite of that in every way. Intarsia you can do as many colors in a row as you want. And you're generally, it's going to be this look where you've got a background color and then large chunks of color placed into that background. And it is always done flat. And then you can obviously sew a seam to create an in the round piece. So you've got your background that's all one color, and then you've got these large plops that are in there. You've got you'll see a lot of like a background with like multicolored hearts on it, or diamonds, or any kind of a thing like that. That is going to be your Intarsia, where you will have as many colors as you want in a row, but you're going to have a large section of one color before you switch to another color, as opposed to switching back and forth between them super regularly every couple of stitches. So switch colors a lot, done in the round. Switch colors not very often, done flat. And so when you're trying to decide, if you have a vision in your head of I want my project to look like this, to me, the first thing that you want to do is decide which color work technique is going to be the one that you want to achieve. Are you going to be switching back and forth between colors every couple of stitches, or do you want a big block of one color and then a big block of another color, kind of a thing? There are some other sort of subsets of stripes and sewing pieces separately and then seaming them together that you can do to achieve some other color work effects. But these are kind of the main three that we're going to talk about. So the ones that we've mentioned here, that was just sort of your overview of all of that. I decided that it can be a little bit challenging for me to come up with what I want to talk about. And I was doing some craft time with our kiddos. And I don't know if you guys had these when you were little, but I certainly did. This was like a staple of my childhood. These little itty bitty beads, and you put them on like a little grid thing, and then in whatever design you want, and then you put an iron on them and iron it so they all melt together. It's probably horrible for you. They're little plastic pieces. It's a whole thing. But my kiddos absolutely loved doing this, and it turns out I liked it too. I may or may not have bought this kind of for myself because I wanted to play with them again. But I noticed that I was creating, as I was playing with them, I noticed I was creating something that I'm like, I wonder if I could knit that color. And so that is what I want to do today. I want to sort of show you, okay, if you come up with something in your head that you want to create, what's the thought process to get there? And I have not done this ahead of time. I have this bead thing, and then I have a blank sheet of graph paper and some colored pencils. And I just kind of wanted to go through the steps that I would do to create something like this. I think this would be a really cool, like, top of a hat for a Fair Isle piece. If I at some point get more hours in my day, I might actually create the whole piece, but I wanted to kind of show you how I get started with this. So the first thing is, which of those three color work techniques make sense to create this kind of a piece? So it's not stripes. I kind of take that one out altogether. No matter which sort of way you cross section this, you're not ever getting just a straight stripe where you've got one color that goes all the way across and then another color that goes all the way across. So the black is the bases there, and then there's three different colors. There's like a light blue, a teal, and then like a Kermit the Frog green on the outside for this. So I know it's not stripes. And so the next thing I need to do is, if I think of each bead as a knit stitch, am I changing colors a lot every row as I'm doing my knit stitches? Or would I have a big block of one color and then a big block of another color? And to me, it's pretty obvious on here. It is the first one. This would be a Fair Isle chart that we would be working from. If I think about sort of starting in the middle and doing around and around and around to create this pattern, I'm going to be switching colors pretty often. And although I use three colors in here, if you think about doing them around and around, there's only ever one color at a time. So I would start with a light blue, and then I would have light blue and black, and then I would have teal and black, and then I would have Kermit green and black. So this would fit perfectly for Fair Isle. And it does, to me, actually look like you'd never do more than 5 of one color before you switch. So this would truly be a Fair Isle pattern. And so to me, what I would do is start to create the kind of the layout to get to this. The first thing is going to be, this is not just like a straight piece. So this is not going to be like a hat where you're going just around and around, or the sleeve of a sweater or something. You've got a shape here that you're creating. So the first thing that you would need to do if you're trying to convert your random design into a Fair Isle chart, the first thing you've got to do is create the shape of the chart. And so this is going to morph slightly from just talking about color work to talking about how to shape knitwear. So the first thing is you're going to start with, you're going to start in the center, and you're going to need to do an increase. So I'm actually going to say this has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 sort of edges. So to me, I'm going to do like a pie piece. That's going to be one of those 6 is going to be the first thing that I'm going to do. And let's see if I can draw on here while looking at the camera. And so I'm just going to start my first pie piece is going to start, we're going to start right in the middle of the hat, right in the center, right there. And we're going to have our first, our 6 pie pieces are each going to start with just 1 stitch, to begin with. So there'll be 6 stitches around because this is just 1 pie piece. And then I would do an increase. Basically, if you're at all familiar with raglan sleeve increases, you're going to do an increase basically at the seam line, at those, like there's going to be 6 seam lines which are going to increase, and then basically just a raglan sleeve increase at each of those 6. So your yarn over is going to add a stitch, and then you're going to do a row that's not yarn over. So that's the 3 stitches there. So you start with 1, the next round you're going to add a stitch on both sides of all 6 of our, like, think about them as stitch markers around, and then we're going to do a round where we're just knitting all of the stitches all the way around without an increase. And so we're just going to do that a bunch of times. So then I come out 1 more stitch, and I know I do an increase 1 time right at the top here, and then I have another row where I don't do any more increases. And then I do that same thing. I come out 1, and I know I'm going to do 2 rows at that number of stitches. So this is the layout. It's almost like a birthday cake shape of how those 6 pie pieces are gonna open up that way. And so I'll just do another 1 or 2 of those. And you may not do yarn overs. That's just the easiest way to chart it. A yarn over increase is going to make that like a hole, like a lace pattern to create that. To me, this is a hat. This is the top of a hat. So that's why I keep touching my head. So this is like one of the 6, and the increase lines are actually going to be the sticky outy part, because as you do your increases, that's going to create more fabric poking out there. So the row of yarn overs is actually going to be like the black part on here. That's going to be the increase. So this middle one is going to be my center light blue. So I'm going to grab some colors now, so you guys can see, and I'm probably going to pick colors that are more different from each other than in my sample, just so that you can see them. These are also my children's colored pencils. So I would use black, but the black is not an option. Here we go. Looks like navy blue is more, is going to work a little bit better. And then I'm going to call it a light blue, and then a pink, and then a green. So they're really going to show up, hopefully, and look very different from each other. So if I want the center here to be the center right there. So what I'm basically looking at is this. So the center here is the first one, and then the black stripe that goes all the way up is like that row of yarn overs, and this black stripe that goes all the way up is that row of yarn overs. So this is what I'm looking at. When I look here, the very, very center is a light blue, and to me, I see 2 rows with the light blue. So I start the very, very center is a light blue, so that's the center one, and then the next one is all light blue. So all 3 on there are going to be light blue. And then the next one, the black is going to be here and the light blue is going to be in the middle. So the light blue, and then we're starting to bring the black in, is going to be in this second row. And that's going to be just on the outside edge. The light blue and the dark blue that I picked don't work very well, or don't show up very different from each other. So we're gonna do brown instead. Brown instead of black, so it will actually show up. So this is the beginning. We've got the first row is all the light blue. The second row is all the light blue. The third row, we're starting to put black in there. And then the black section gets a little bit bigger and we switch to the second color. So the black section gets a little bit bigger. I'm going to call the black section 2 stitches across on the next one. And then we're going to switch to the next color, which is the purple. So because I wanted the black to get a little bit bigger, the purple section, I've only got 2 stitches left. On the next one, or I've only got 1 stitch left in the middle, so that was an easy decision. If I wanted the black to get bigger, I've only got 1 stitch left for purple. The next section on my pattern, the teal starts to get a lot bigger. There, it went from 1 stitch to now the teal has 2 stitches across. So I want to make sure that on my next section, the purple can get bigger. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to do, I want to make sure that that purple is centered. So, you know what? This is still not showing up very well. I'm going to call all of my non-black color this orange color instead of trying to switch between 2 different colors. I'm just gonna leave, if I leave it white, it's the black color. It's the it's like the outline. If I color it orange, it's one of the bluey greeny guys in there. So I've got this section here. Now I want to go back down to only having 1 of the orange left. So I'm gonna go back to just having 1 of the orange left there. I'm gonna do 2 rows that way. And the black is getting way bigger, and then the black starts to get smaller again as we go out towards the tip, and we start getting some more stitches coming in of the green. So we want the black to have our 3 rows there. This time, see, this is where my brain is starting to hurt a little bit. I said on my, when I was advertising this, I said watch it to watch Erica make a fool of herself as she tries to do Colorwork design live, and I think I am fulfilling the brief there. Spatial awareness and I are not always best friends. So the black color, so you can see the orange like cross is this teal part right there. And so the black came way out, and then the black goes back down again. So I want the black part to stay the black part gets skinny again, and we actually start to come in here with, so they just touch on the edges. This one just touches the green, like the teal in the middle just touches the green on the outside. So I'm going to make the orange just touch there on that one. And then the next one, the orange gets bigger again. and it's sort of encroaching outward onto the black. And so we're actually going to fill this all the way in because we're not going to have the same, like the stitches aren't going to go away in the middle here. We're going to keep coming in with more color. So that's going to keep that way. So the black came out and then the black receded again, and then the black is going to come back out again and starts to get bigger out at the tip. And so this orange, or the background, is going to start getting narrower again. And so this is just kind of how you would go about doing this. And what I would probably do is I would start to knit this out. So I would cast on at the center. I would cast on all in whatever the accent color is going to be. Cast on 6 stitches all the way around. And then I would be doing, kind of put stitch markers in, and I would do all of my first round of increases in that. And then I would introduce the like the neutral color, the black in the sample that I made, to do sort of the 2 black stitches in a row, and then the contrast color, 2 black stitches in a row, the contrast color, all the way around following the chart. And so the contrast colors are going to get bigger, and then the black is going to get bigger, and then the contrast colors are going to get bigger. And so what I would do is I would knit a sample of this. I would cast on in the middle, and I would play with this. I would probably start, if I was just getting started and just wanting to see how this would work and what kind of shape it would create, I would pick super, super high contrast. So that's my number one recommendation when you're doing a colorwork piece, especially if you're just getting started with colorwork, is you actually want to make sure that you don't do colors that are too similar to each other. The more different the colors can be from each other, the easier it's going to be to tell where you are in your chart, to tell that everything is showing up the way you want it to, and it's just going to give you more bang for your buck. It's going to give you more punchiness with those, with the work that you're doing to really create that look for you, to have that really high contrast. I do think a neutral and then a bright, like popping color work particularly well. I think it can almost be hard for us to tell the difference when we look at 2 colors. Like when I was looking at these 3 different colors of beads, the light blue, the teal, and the green, to me these beads looked wildly different colors when I was playing with them, but they almost read as one color when you're looking at the whole thing. So I think it's harder if you're saying like, oh, well, the blue and the green look really different from each other. I think we can trick ourselves a little bit with that. And in color work, I would say do a really dark neutral and then light sort of bright pop colors, or a really light neutral and then really dark, like a navy and a merlot kind of a color, so that you make sure you've got super high contrast. Self-striping yarns can be really effective in this kind of color work, in the Fair Isle color work, because your yarn is going to change colors. Keep one solid color background as like your background color, and then use your main color as a self-striping. And then you get that extra layer of interest without having more ends to weave in, more trying to make decisions about what kind of colors to put together to get that fun effect. Let the self-striping colored yarn do that part. The other recommendation that I'm going to make is to use a solid color yarn, or a self-striping. This is not a color work pretty much of any kind, is generally not a great place for variegated yarns or like a hand-painted yarn, unless it's self-striping. And even self-stripings can be a little challenging. Let's say you've got a black contrast color, and your self-striping goes from bright colors into more dark colors. Well, once you're working with the dark colored stripe on your black background, it's not going to show up anymore. So you can certainly use a self-striping. I would recommend pick a self-striping yarn that doesn't have any stripe that's even close to the same color as your contrast color, that's going to be solid all the time. It's just your hard work of following the chart and doing a really cool and interesting piece gets lost if your colors don't really stand out from each other. And that is doubly, triply, quadruply true when you're working with a variegated or a hand paint, um, even like a kettle dyed, kind of depending on how it is, how dramatic the color differences are. Especially if you're newer to color work, pick just solid color yarn. It's just going to make life easier with this. The last tidbit that I would give to you, I generally try to keep these 20-30 minutes, is to, I want to say don't mess up. That's can be a little rough. Fair Isle especially, well, Fair Isle and Intarsia both are very challenging to unravel. So if you're new and learning a new technique and worried that things may not go well, this may be a great time to do a swatch, do a little practice piece with yarn that if it doesn't go perfectly, it's okay. You can just cut the yarn and throw it away or do whatever you need to do with it, and you don't feel like you have to rip the whole thing out. It's a challenge to rip out color work. In Tarsia, you're going to have a million little tiny balls. Every one of these is a different ball of yarn, so you're going to have some big balls and little balls, and it's going to be a bit of a mess. Fair Isle, you have to rip each color sort of separately, so you like rip out 3 of the yellow when you're pulling the yellow yarn, and then 2 of the blue, and then 3 of the yellow, and then 2 of the blue. It's doable, it's just a pain. So this would be a good time to make a little practice piece to make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into with the whole color work and just practicing your charts and things like that. I will definitely be back with an Instagram live at some point to go more in detail with the chart reading. I don't know if this was helpful or useful to anybody, but I would have been interested in seeing how somebody else got started with how would you translate a color piece into charting out something like that. I do find charts to be the best way to do an Intarsia or a Fair Isle color work piece. Written out instructions with like work 5 stitches in color 1, work 3 stitches in color 2. I can't even say I've ever really seen instructions written that way. So you got to do a chart. You've got to figure out how to read a chart if you're going to do a color work piece. And truly, I love charts. And it's like spatial awareness is not really my thing, but to me, 1 square is 1 stitch. If that square is orange, you use the orange yarn. If that square is white, you use the white yarn. And that's all there is to a color work chart, which I think is a very approachable way to do it. And I can tell as I'm working, does my piece look like the picture? If it doesn't, I've done something wrong. And I always like to be able to tell right away. The sooner that I know that something has gone wrong, the less I'm going to have to take apart. So I think that can definitely be a good thing. So if anybody has got any questions for me, drop them down below. I will have a look and make sure that I get back to you. Go and knit some color work. The pieces that I've pulled up here to show tonight are all patterns that are available on our Ravelry store. It's Nomad Originals. This one I think is Yikes Stripes. This is a very old. So I've been uploading patterns to Ravelry for over 10 years now. This is one of my first, and I still really like it. It's a good introduction to stripes if you've not ever done any kind of a stripe before. It gives me the vintage Doctor Who scarf kind of vibes. It's not an official one, and I would not knit one as long as the true Doctor Who scarf. But it's just kind of a fun little thing. It's a good scrap buster too if you've got a bunch of scrap yarns. And then this is Fair Isle Sweater Skill Drill. I think I did it in like a 6-month size and a 2-year size kind of a thing. This is the bigger of the two. And my 5.5-year-old can still wear it. It's like 3/4 length and cropped. It's made for a smaller kid. And I'm sad because I loved it, and neither of my kids really wore it all that much. I'm not sure why. They're not really sweater kids, which is heartbreaking to me as a sweater maker. And then you know what? I'm not even positive that this is up on Ravelry. If it is, I will drop it in the comment section, the link to it. Yeah, I think it may not be up there. Coming soon if it's not, because I certainly have the pattern for it. So enjoy the rest of your evening, and I hope to hear from you if you've got any questions later.